All right, so we are on chapter 8. The last thing that we read was Gerda realized that Papa was trying to send her a message. So he was doing the digging motion based on their favorite song, and she took it as Papa wanted me to dig. But why? So I loved reading your guys' responses, and I agree with a lot of you. I think that he wanted to do that to tell her that he could maybe she could maybe escape by digging? I don't know. So let's see. Chapter 8. Years ago, Mama and some other women in our building used to garden in a small patch of dirt behind our apartment. They enjoyed the work, and the food from the garden was very good. But one year, the food shortages had been particularly fierce, and the harvest disappeared into the hands of those who walked by it each day. Mama never gardened again, said it wasn't worth the bother. I found the shovel after school right where she had left it. It was tucked in a forgotten corner of the basement, along with the things other families in our building had no room for upstairs. There were many boxes and crates and dusty surplus tins left over from the war that probably weren't even edible anymore. Nobody ever went down here, though. The corners always stayed dark, and every time I came, it felt like the roof and dirt floor were closer to each other than the time before. Although my instinct was to leave the basement as soon as possible, I forced myself to stay and stare at the shovel, as if another hard look would somehow help me understand what Papa wanted me to do. Perhaps he wanted me to encourage Mama to stop gardening again, or for me to plant one myself. No, I didn't think so. He had pantomimed the lyrics for digging, not for planting. Digging. Maybe before he left, he had buried some sort of treasure nearby. Papa must be worried about our family, and of course, he would want to take care of us. Well, he didn't need to worry. Fritz's after school bricklaying job helped us with money. Sure, we didn't have a television, but Anna did if there was anything I really wanted to watch. Most of our entertainment came from Fritz's record player, which was good enough most of the time. And we had no Trabant like other families, but it was okay to walk where we needed to go. And besides, they were ugly cars anyway. Still, if Papa had some sort of treasure buried in the area, I wanted to find it. I hoped to see him again at the viewing platform soon so I could try to figure out where to dig. Fritz didn't get home that night by supper, which was unusual, but sometimes his bricklaying required extra time at work, and so Mama and I didn't really think much of going ahead without him. He would probably get back before supper was finished. This is better anyway. Mama's shoulders seemed heavier than usual, and just seeing them made mine feel heavy too. I had some very sad news at work today and wanted to share it with you in private. I set down my fork and looked over at her. I couldn't imagine what must have happened, and already a pit was forming in my stomach. Your friend Anna has an older brother, doesn't she? A boy named Peter? If she had not spoken another word, I would have already known how Mama's story was going to end. I wanted to press my hands over my ears, pretending if I couldn't hear it, then it didn't happen. But life never works that way, and all I could do was close my eyes and pray that I was wrong. Anna's parents got a visit from Stasi this afternoon. Peter attempted an escape last night, hidden in a special panel of a car from the west. He was discovered before reaching the border and tried to make a run to the west, but they shot him in the back. In all the confusion, the students driving the car were able to escape, but Peter didn't make it. Mama grabbed my hand and gave it a squeeze. Anna probably got the news once she came home from school. The family has been allowed a day home tomorrow to mourn his loss. But this will be a terrible time for them. I thought you should know. It's a reminder to all of us of what could happen to those who try to escape. They die. Tears rolled from my cheeks, but I didn't care if Mama saw. I couldn't begin to imagine the pain that Anna and her family must be feeling right now. She loved her brother just as much as I loved both of mine. Losing one of them would feel like my whole world was coming to an end. Fritz would feel awful too. He'd feel guilty for knowing Peter's plans and not stopping him. Wait, Fritz had known, and he wasn't home. Why isn't Fritz back from work? I tried not to sound as worried as I was. After all, he had been late before, but not often, and Fritz had said nobody knew Peter's secret but him. What if Fritz had tried to escape too? Although she had only the smallest understanding of why my face was suddenly flushed and hands were shaking, Mama said she knew I was upset and asked if I needed some time alone. I left the table and practically ran into Fritz's room. I had half expected to see a note on his pillow, too, some words of apology and explanation for his own escape attempt. There was nothing. So maybe it was just my imagination, but every minute that passed sharpened my worries. Fritz was never this late. I reappeared in the kitchen where my mother was finishing cleaning up, except for a plate she had left out for Fritz. Can we go to his job site and look for him? I asked. Please, Mama, can we go and find him? Mama pressed her eyebrows together. Gerda, I know this news about Anna's brother upsets you, but Fritz and Peter were friends, I said. Fritz knew about the escape. Without another word, Mama set down her dish rag and hurried to get a coat. Minutes later, we were outside, pressing through the busy city streets, deeper into East Berlin, where Fritz had been hired to help lay brick for a new building. So much of Berlin had been destroyed in the war, and even now, 20 years later, piles of rubble were still strewn about the city. The government was rebuilding as quickly as they could, but it took a lot of resources to maintain the wall. Their second priority was rebuilding public places or areas near the border that were meant to show the world had superior our system was. That show the world how superior our system was. It was behind the glossy scenes that everything remained in ruins. Every day after school, Fritz had been working on one of those high profile buildings, and they were in a hurry because of some visitors coming from Moscow. A few men were still on the job site when Mama and I got there, but Fritz was clearly not one of them. She told me to stay back while she talked to the job foreman. I hated being left behind, but a man in his position wouldn't want me in the conversation. So I waited where I could see their faces as my stomach twisted into knots. In response to Mama's question, the foreman shook his head and his mouth was turned in a distinct frown. He checked his watch and then spoke to her some more. Even from here, I could tell that nothing he had to say was good. Where was Fritz? I wanted to scream. Why were they just standing there talking? Finally, Mama's back stiffened and she clutched at a handkerchief in her fist, but she only nodded, looking as if she wanted to scream too. The foreman reached out a hand as if he might try to comfort her, but Mama stepped back, said a few more words, and then turned. Without speaking, she grabbed my hand and yanked me into a walk so fast that to keep up with her, I almost had to jog along. Where is he? I asked. Mama, where? Hush! Wait until we get home. The walk to the job site had taken less than a half hour, and though we were moving much faster now, it seemed like hours before we finally entered the safety of the apartment building. I asked again what the foreman had said, but by then it took all of Mama's effort just to hold her emotions together. She didn't say a word until we were inside our own apartment and her trembling fingers had locked the door behind us. Then she collapsed onto the ground and sobs poured out of her. The Stasi came to get him today, she said through choked breaths. They believe he was involved in Peter's escape attempt. They took him away. What will they do to him? I once overheard Papa telling my mother that he wasn't afraid of anything except our secret police. He said that if he were ever arrested, no matter what they did to him, his life would be over. I didn't know a lot about what happened to people after the Stasi got them. The only people who knew for sure were either the agents or people subjected to their interrogations or tortures. They rarely talked about what had happened to them if they ever returned. Even the locations of Stasi prisons were a secret, so I knew Mama couldn't answer any of my questions, but Fritz was her son. Even if it was only based on instinct, she had to have some answers, some way to make this better. Except I had learned long ago that there were some things even a mother couldn't fix. She couldn't bring Papa and Dom back or bring us to them. She couldn't keep me from missing them every single day, and nobody I knew could bring down that wall. All my mother said was, they told Fritz it was only for questioning, but the foreman doesn't know if that's true. Then she turned to me. Are you sure Fritz knew about Peter's escape? He told me last night. And you waited this long to say anything? By the time Fritz told me, Peter had already left. I'm sorry, Mama. She closed her eyes and the tears ran beneath her lashes like the steady leak of a pipe. I put my arms around her, hoping to comfort her a little. Go to bed, Gerda. I didn't want to. It wasn't my bedtime yet, and I wanted more than anything to stay awake until Fritz came home. If he came home. I'm going to Eric Krause's apartment next door, Mama said. He will know if there's anything we can do. We didn't see Herr Kraus as often as we used to, not since Papa left. Mama had brought him dinners after his wife died last year, but she also felt it was dangerous for the Stasi to believe that we were anything more than casual neighbors. If she wanted to see him now, then I knew how frightened she was for Fritz. Let me come too, I said. You've done enough, Mama snapped. Then her eyes softened. I didn't mean that. Please go to bed. I kissed her cheek, though I'm sure she didn't feel it, and apologized again, though I wasn't exactly sure what I'd done wrong. On the way to my bedroom, I passed Fritz's room. The door was closed tight, which I found odd because it hadn't been when we left. Maybe he'd come home while we were out. I turned the handle and darted in, fully expecting to see Fritz lying on his bed with his Beatles album turned low. I saw that record first, smashed on his floor like someone had crushed it beneath his boot. Fritz had a poster of Anne Margaret on his wall, supposedly a popular actress in America. But that had been ripped down, and nothing but the tacked-in corners remained. The rest of his room was in disarray, with drawers pulled out and books thrown onto his bed, but nothing else seemed to be damaged. The Stasi had been here. They had stood right where I now did, and maybe gone through our entire apartment too. Although it should have shocked me more, somehow this too seemed normal. I told you to go to bed, Mama called from the front room. I almost asked her to come and see what had happened, but a voice inside me warned it would be too much for her to handle. Um, for her to handle. I planned to get up extra early in the morning and clean it for her. Then, when Fritz came home, and I had to believe he would, everything would be okay. Whether that was true or not, I chose to believe. I made myself believe it, or the worry would drive me insane.